want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the amazing Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. Tom is always in the flesh, except when he's missing. Okay, Energy Week is a product of, well, it's something Tom and I put together based on stuff that I find in the news, which I look for every day. And the material that I'm looking for is about energy and climate change, and it goes up to my blog, geoharvey.com. And from there, we take, you say it.
The best of the blog.
The best of the blog. We are so predictable.
Well, it is the best of the blog.
Yes, it is.
The three best items you pick every day.
Yeah, the three best items of the day. Almost always. Sometimes it's 4 one day and 2 another day.
It averages out to 3.
Yeah, it averages out to 3. And they go together at a website that Tom and I use for keeping notes and things like that. And that website is, let's see, it's down that way. Scroll down, you'll find it. There's also the entry for the website is made into a document file that you can download, so you can actually look at these and the links.
Where do you scroll that down? You get to your website.
Yes, and then what happens is when a person goes to either of those sources and finds the article that we're talking about, you've got a link to the original article. The link is also there at geoharvey.com.
Well, some of these are worth linking up to if you got the time. I mean, some of them are very in-depth.
Absolutely. We have, unfortunately, a lot of stuff about wars going on, a war going on in the Ukraine. I think this war should have a name other than the Russo-Ukrainian War. It should be called the Dummies War.
We're going to talk about that on the show, I think.
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why Vladimir Putin started this. It's because he wants to sell his product, and everybody in Europe is saying, we're going to eliminate purchase of this product by 2050. So he wanted to stir things up, make it more valuable, sell it for a higher price, sell less of it, stretch it out, the whole thing. And he just made them matter. And he did it. And he had a war chest for the war that was $500 billion. And where was it? It was in European banks.
Duh.
Not all of it was in European banks, but apparently more than half of it was. Okay, we should start, I suppose.
Yeah, we got a picture coming up.
We have a picture. Whoops.
Yeah,
how did that happen? There we go.
Picture. I got to figure out which mouse I'm using. Here we go.
There you go.
There's the picture, and here it is coming up.
There it is. And this is the Rivne nuclear power plant, which is in the Ukraine. This is not one of the Ukrainian power plants that has been captured by the Russians.
Yeah, you can see the writing on the building is in Russian.
Well, it's in Ukrainian, actually.
Well, it's in, what do they call that script?
Cyrillic.
Yeah.
Cyrillic. It's based on Greek. Well, actually, the Roman script that we use is based on Greek too, but not quite as directly.
A little different way.
Yeah. So, this came from PBS. What do you got for a title?
Russia's invasion of Ukraine highlights the vulnerability of nuclear power plants.
Yeah, well...
Or as some people say, nuclear.
Nuclear. Jimmy Carter used to say that, which always kind of struck me.
Yeah, because he's a nuclear engineer.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
okay.
I can understand George Bush, but I never could understand Jimmy Carter.
Well, I forgive Jimmy Carter. I really do. I didn't like Jimmy Carter as a president so much, but he's a great ex-president, the best of them.
Is he, huh?
Oh, I think so.
Good.
Yeah. A series of Russian attacks near nuclear power plants over the last 2 weeks are elevating... That's not good grammar. The series is a singular thing. A series. It isn't are elevating, it is elevating fears of potential accidents and what they could trigger. John Yang reports on the latest and speaks to science correspondent Miles O'Brien, who covered the aftermath of Chernobyl.
Well, this is an interview, this one here.
Yeah.
There's a 5-minute video that's worth looking at. And there's going to be more about this later on in the show.
Yeah.
Well, strategically, it makes sense for the Russians to be there.
Yeah.
It's north of Kiev, and it's a straight shot right into the capital.
Yeah.
If you can figure out what they're really trying to do there.
Well, I think they were trying to take over the capital. Now they are probably at a point where they can't do it at all. So what they're going to do is put up cannons and shell the capital into rubble.
Well, we'll be talking about that again. Ukraine relies heavily on nuclear power for its electricity. Mm-hmm. It has 15 operative reactors. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You need water flowing over the hot cores of these operating plants in order to keep them from melting down. And if you cut off power to any of them, you could march down a road to a Fukushima scenario.
Yes.
And that's what they're afraid of.
That's
one of
what
the
they're
things
afraid of. In fact, what is it, Zaporozhnia?
We'll touch base on that
there's
one
6 reactors there.
Yeah.
And if
we've seen the picture of it.
It's if you had a common fault meltdown, you'd have multiple reactors going. It could be very like Fukushima.
It could be a problem.
The only reason
Chernobyl is no longer generating electricity.
Yes.
Okay. But it still stores nuclear fuel, which must be cooled.
Yes.
Okay. The actual melted down portion of Chernobyl, where the real trouble occurred, does not need power or water to keep it safe. So it's not as bad as maybe it could be. However, it's always good to have visibility of what's going on at Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Okay? Right now, we're a little bit blind about Chernobyl, and that's kind of a scary thing.
Yeah, the power went down, which meant that they didn't have any idea what was going on there. Then the power was restored, and then the Russians apparently destroyed the power lines.
Well, we'll be talking about that,
Yeah.
but we really don't know what's going on.
It's a funny thing. The American intelligence on this has been, I think, it looks to me like it's been remarkably good.
Uh-huh.
I don't think the Russian intelligence on was all that good.
Uh-huh.
I don't think, and I think
it's hard
what I'm
to follow,
saying.
nevertheless.
What?
It's hard to follow.
It is, but I kind of wonder whether Vladimir Putin knows as much about what's going on as Joe Biden does.
Good question. Good question.
I was reading about a situation where some skiers in the Winter War, which was 1939 in Finland,
Okay.
skied right up to the Russian lines and threw a whole bunch of Molotov cocktails into a building, which then caught fire. And the Russians who were around that building cheered.
Well, let's move along here. We got
yes,
nice picture of a bridge here.
That looks familiar. I can tell you I've never been on that bridge.
Nor have I.
Yeah.
Nor have I.
I had an uncle who used to live very near it on an island in San Francisco Bay. And
it's a pretty bridge. I mean, nice pictures of it. Anyhow.
Don't say Alcatraz. That isn't where he lived.
Didn't even occur to me.
Well, it occurs to everybody else, Tom.
Well, that picture there, and I'm going to bring it up again. That's traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge, which is quite a beautiful bridge.
Yeah, it is indeed.
And it looks like the traffic coming is a little bit heavier than the traffic going. There's a lot of people walking.
Yeah, there are. I see people walking on the Brooklyn Bridge, I think.
Well, you can walk across the George Washington Bridge because I've done so.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah.
And I bicycled it when I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Well, the EPA officially reinstates California's authority to craft its own vehicle emission standards. Huh?
Yeah. Well, the EPA announced that it had restored California's authority to implement its own greenhouse gas emission standards and zero emission sales mandates. The EPA is also allowing other states to adopt California's stricter standards in lieu of the federal rules. And I don't know if this was something.
I got a little background on here.
Okay, go ahead.
In 2019, the Trump administration rolled back California's decades-old waiver that had allowed it to set its own pollution standards. How dare they? This move officially reverses that Trump-era action.
And the Trump administration thought that the automobile industry was going to applaud that action.
And they didn't.
And then they didn't.
As a result, the waiver granted to California to implement its advanced clean car program in 2013 is back in force. Okay. In addition, other states are now allowed to adopt California's emission standards in lieu of the federal standards. And if I got to say it again, the California standards are a little bit tighter.
Yes, actually, they're quite a bit tighter in some ways.
Well, for what it's worth, transportation accounts for almost a third of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, and clamping down on that is going to make quite a lot of difference. Okay.
So we got another picture coming up here.
When I first saw this picture, I thought it was some sort of space module blasting off.
Yeah, it does look like that,
doesn't it? But it's
it's an oil rig.
It's an oil rig.
In the wintertime, there's snow on the ground.
And there's stuff going on around it that's causing smoke down near the ground. And
that's steam.
The moon is in the background. That's steam?
I think it's steam.
Okay, I believe you. This is from the BBC.
War in Ukraine, quote, oil prices plunge as the UAE supports a supply boost.
Yeah, oil prices have plunged after the UAE said it supported increasing production. The benchmark Brent crude fell by more than 17% at one point after the statement. The fall follows weeks of escalating prices due to fears of supply disruption sparked by Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. And you can bet that the Russians, the head Russian is really mad at the United Arab Emirates for doing this.
I would imagine.
It means
for what it's worth, the UAE is United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
And it's a country on the Arabian Peninsula.
Right.
Formed from a federation of 7 emirates.
7.
7 of them.
And I don't know.
Each one of them's a city, basically.
Yeah.
It's a country formed
around a city.
Around 7 city-states.
Yeah.
And they're important. They get oil.
They have a lot of oil. Okay, should we go on?
Energy prices have been soaring due to a rapid rebound in the demand for oil.
Yes.
Which had collapsed during the pandemic.
Yes.
U.S. and Canada have announced bans on Russian oil imports, which you just mentioned, while the UK said it would phase them out by the end of the year. So there's crazy things going on over there.
What has happened here is Vladimir Putin has been withholding gas and oil from Europe in order to drive the price up.
Yeah.
And who benefits from this? Well, the UAE.
Yeah.
Because Vladimir Putin is being cut out of the market, and the UAE is saying,
we got oil.
We got oil.
Here it is.
And we're going to help you. Okay.
But we got a picture here of Hoover Dam coming up.
We do, complete with a bathtub ring. That is a nice picture of a bathtub ring, but the bathtub ring is not very nice. That. Yeah.
I have been there.
I have never been there, but I remember.
There was a bathtub ring, but it wasn't like that one.
Yeah, and I remember seeing pictures of this dam when I was a little kid. They were talking about it being built and stuff. It was really...
Well, the size of the drought in the U.S. has increased by the area of California just in the past month.
That's pretty big.
That's
this is from
big.
CNN. The West is not the only region with severely dry weather so far this year. According to Thursday's report from the U.S. Drought Monitor, more than 61% of the contiguous U.S. is in some classification of drought. The figure is nearing...
I mean, that's pretty serious.
Yeah. The all-time record is 65%. This is 61%. And that all-time record was in 2012. So,
well, in the last month, the area of the continental U.S. in drought has increased by nearly 170,000 square miles.
That's a lot of acres.
Well, it's bigger than the state of California.
Bigger than the state of California.
It's the largest portion of the country in a state of drought since 2012, and it's still increasing significantly.
Yes.
The West is expected to be in a drought through the rest of this year at the very least.
At the very least.
For the first time since it was filled more than 50 years ago, Lake Powell on the Colorado River And I guess that's sitting in the background there.
There you go.
The second largest reservoir in the country is projected to dip past a critical threshold, threatening water supplies and putting a key source of hydropower generation at heightened risk of being forced offline. Fire is one of the early impacts of the dryness.
Yes.
As the planet warms, drought and extreme heat will fuel deadly fires.
Yes.
So this is scary all around.
It's scary all around. And with Lake Powell being that low, the hydroelectric project there cannot produce.
It's at the verge of shutting down.
At the verge of shutting down. The lower that gets, the lower the pressure at the turbines gets. And at some point, it's just not worthwhile turning those turbines anymore.
No,
And that's,
absolutely.
That's when it's not much lower than it is. Now,
It's almost at that threshold as we speak.
right.
Matter of fact, this was written a week ago, so it's probably at that threshold
It
right now.
probably has not got any better. Okay, I'm going to go on.
Why don't you go on? We got a nice little picture of a lovely little car called a Lady Vesta.
A Lady Vesta.
And for what it's worth, Lady Vesta herself was the goddess of the home, hearth, and family life
Yes,
in the Roman religion.
yes.
So that's Lady Vesta.
That's Lady Vesta, which is a Russian-built car, and that's a Russian-built building.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is a Russian-built car. That did not come with the article. The article's from the BBC, and so I went out looking for a Russian car, and that was the one that I found. So,
Interesting.
what do you have for?
Looks like a regular car.
It looks like a very
There's
ordinary
a
car.
church in the background, isn't it?
I don't know. Maybe it is a church.
Looks like a church.
It could be. Okay, what do you got for a title, Tom?
Russia hits back at Western sanctions with export bans.
What are you
This
doing?
is kind of silly.
This is like, if you don't stop shooting at me, I'm going to shoot myself.
You don't play by my rules, I'm going to take my football and go home.
Yeah. After Western countries set import limits on its oil and gas, Russia retaliated by imposing export bans on a string of products until the end of 2022. The ban covers exports of telecoms, medical, vehicle, agricultural, electrical equipment, as well as forestry products such as timber.
Well, the ban includes more than 200 products.
So Vladimir Putin is upset because the Europeans aren't buying his oil and gas. And the reason he's upset is because that means he gets less money from exporting those products. So what does he do? He says, well, I'm not going to export this stuff either, which means that the money he's getting is going to be decreased even further. This is not...
Well, this could be pretty troublesome.
It could be...
The ban includes more than 200 products.
Yeah, but it's going to be much more troublesome.
About 48 countries will be affected.
Yeah, the biggest one of which, the one that will be affected worst, is going to be Russia.
It seems that way. The bulk of what Western nations buy from Russia is raw materials. Oil and gas, aluminum, nickel, potash and phosphates. This conflict has already pushed the prices sharply upwards.
Yeah, but this means that the thing he's mad about, which is loss of foreign income, is going to be exacerbated by this. It's just going to be made worse. Okay, should we go on?
Isn't that like shoot yourself to spite your face or something like that?
You cut off your nose.
Cut off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
Okay.
President Putin has said there will be negative consequences for the world's food markets because Russia is a major product of agricultural fertilizers.
Yes, well, there are better ways to do things than the way agribiz does them, and that they are the people who use the most fertilizer.
Well, we got a picture coming up here.
We do indeed.
Yeah, let's take a look
This
at that.
is a picture
wow,
of
$5 a gallon.
station in Massachusetts. And I chose this again, I couldn't use the one with the article, so I chose this because it was Massachusetts instead of California, where the prices were even higher.
Well, the prices aren't quite that high yet in Vermont, but they're up there.
Yeah, and they have
They're up there.
They have started going down in various places. This article is from CNN.
Why record high gas prices won't be solved by drilling more oil in the U.S.
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons. As the U.S. oil and gasoline prices set records, politicians of both parties called for a seemingly easy solution, which is to drill our way out of the problem. But the idea that the United States can be fully energy independent, thereby keeping gas prices low, is a fantasy, numerous experts told CNN. And there's a bunch of
the
reasons.
U.S. is the world's largest consumer of oil. That's no surprise.
Yeah.
Using about 20% of the world's total.
Yeah.
Okay. An estimated 40 billion barrels worth of proven oil reserves are still untapped. But it tends to be lighter and different from the heavier imported oil we currently use. Okay. The U.S. oil refineries are not built to refine this light crude.
Yeah.
So you can't just bring in more oil because we don't know what to do with it.
Well, we know what to do with it. There are a bunch
we don't
of
have
things.
the equipment
I mean,
to do with it.
For one thing, drilling is not guaranteed to produce results, and it takes time to get to what you want. And
Absolutely, yeah.
by the time you find anything, the war could be over. But nevertheless,
Let's move along to Saturday.
let's go to Saturday.
Interesting picture
Saturday
of a truck
is
here.
March 12th. This is a
Get the picture
Tesla
of the truck
Semi,
up here.
and this article comes from Clean Technica.
And that is a Tesla semi.
That's right.
Tesla's getting big in the automotive business, aren't they?
Well, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that, I guess,
Okay.
right now.
What do you have for a title?
I bet I got a title.
I bet you do.
EPA wants to cut semi-emissions by 60%.
That's a fairly
There's
good cut,
a semi.
which has no emissions.
There's
Earlier,
no radiator, is it?
no radiator. That's right. Earlier this week, the EPA said it would propose rules to reduce smog forming and greenhouse gas emissions from heavy-duty vehicles. The rules will require cuts of up to 60% in the NOx emissions. That's
Nitrous oxide.
nitrous oxide and nitric oxide both. And the big one is nitrous oxide. The Department of Transportation is to offer funding to help companies meet these goals.
Well, the EPA is proposing new, stronger standards to promote clean air and reduce pollution from heavy-duty vehicles,
Yeah,
starting with model year 2027.
yeah,
Okay, so they're giving them a break.
yeah,
The standards would reduce emissions of smog and soot forming nitrogen oxides from heavy-duty gasoline and diesel engines, and set updated greenhouse gas standards to support transition to a zero-emissions future.
right.
Now, the Department of Transportation has announced $1.5 billion to help purchase U.S.-built electric school and transit buses. We've talked about that.
Yes,
As well as offer other low-emission heavy-duty vehicles like semi-trucks and garbage trucks. The department also announced another $2.2 billion. They're giving away a lot of money
yes.
in funding to 35 transit agencies across 18 states. So that's almost $4 billion.
If we go to them and say that we're big movers, do you think that they would give us, money to stop emitting? Okay.
Well, we got a picture here of some funny-looking machines here.
Yes, that's what we have.
It is a bunch of wind turbines
A bunch of wind
in
turbines.
the Ukraine.
And this is from Renews. Those wind turbines are in the Ukraine. Yeah.
Half of Ukraine renewables capacity is under threat.
Half of the Ukraine's 9,500 megawatts, that's 9.5 gigawatts, of renewable energy is threatened with complete or partial destruction due to the Russian war on the country. The Ukrainian Association of Renewable Energy said 47% of installed renewable capacity is in regions where active hostilities are taking place. And by the way, the Russians are apparently going after taking over physically the nuclear power plants and wrecking all of the renewable.
Well, I got a sentence on exactly that. The
Yeah.
destruction of energy infrastructure is one of the war tactics of Russia's forces.
That's what they're trying to do.
90% of the wind farm capacity in the Ukraine is located in areas where active hostilities are currently underway. More than half of the wind farms have already been shut down.
Yeah.
So this is really impacting the Ukraine pretty heavily.
Impacting it pretty heavily, and the Russians want to terrify everybody, and they're doing things like bombing maternity wards, which apparently it looks like that's something that they have targeted. They've targeted
They
hospitals.
seem to have, yes.
And we don't have it in an article this week, but apparently President Biden said that he believed that Putin is guilty of war crimes.
He said that, didn't he?
Yeah, and
He's been highly criticized
the
for it.
Russian government, of course, is incensed that he would say that. But I have no doubt that Vladimir Putin is guilty of war crimes.
I think he is.
So,
I think he is.
Okay,
Well, we got a picture coming up here. I'll see
this
if
is
I
a
can
very
get it up.
mild-looking flood. This is a very mild picture of what actually happened.
Well, that's the Brisbane flood of this year.
Yeah, that's right. I came across that. It was free, and I figured I'd use the actual flood instead of some impressive
It looks
looking
kind of
flood.
wet in those roads there.
It sure does. Well, you're not going to drive through that.
Not and survive. We don't know how deep that is, but that's more than a hubcap deep. That's
I would bet, based on seeing that road going down to that a car would get partway into there and start floating. Okay.
Well, on the Australian floods, quote, "I'm angry it's happening again."
Yeah, this is from the BBC. Sophia Walter, although, the way the British pronounce things, it might be Sophia,
Could be.
is angry. In 2011, the hill she lives on in Brisbane was turned into an island by a 100-year flood. That's a flood big enough that it should only happen once in 100 years. Now it's happening all over again. Just as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was publishing its latest update saying there will be even more wildfires, and more floods coming.
Well, it's bad over there. In the past 2 weeks, floods in eastern Australia have killed at least 21 people.
That's not good.
Thousands of homes have been left uninhabitable.
Yeah.
Natural disaster after natural disaster has become the new normal.
The new normal. These are
Scientists are united in their view that global warming is making severe floods likely, which we've talked about on the show.
Absolutely. We've talked about this many times.
Warmer oceans increase the amount of moisture moving from seas to the atmosphere. That will most likely increase the intensity of extreme rainfall events.
Right. Okay.
And the video is a picture of the New South Wales. Oh, there's a video here you can look up. Footage of New South Wales floods in the past 2 weeks, and that's part of what we're looking at.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to Sunday, March 13th, and we have a picture
be having
of
a good time.
Oil tanker.
Looks like an oil tanker to me. It's kind of an empty oil tanker, though.
It is from the BBC. Yeah, you can tell, Tom has got a good eye for these things because he's lived on ships. And that tanker is obviously...
Well, yeah, you can see the water line there.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's just pretty close to being empty.
It's pretty close to being empty.
And I guess those guys in the little boat are fishermen. I don't know.
I have no idea. Okay, this is from the
They don't look like they're pleasure seekers.
This is from the BBC. What do you got?
Well, Russia's attack on Ukraine helped thaw U.S.-Venezuela relations.
That's tanker,
interesting.
By the way, is a Russian tanker, which happened to be at Maracaibo. So this is a Russian tanker at Venezuela. These are desperate times.
It's going down to Venezuela to fill up, I guess.
Yeah. These are desperate times, and desperate measures are needed. Oil helps make the world go round, and Venezuela has lots of it. And when the world is in crisis, as it is with a ban on Russian oil exports causing prices to surge, leaders start revisiting those awkward relationships. So
well, the U.S. and Venezuela have not seen eye to eye for several years now.
Wasn't it Hugo Chavez?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are signs that the relationship might be starting to blossom.
Not just thaw, but blossom.
Venezuela has large oil reserves.
Yes.
And their use of them got cut back severely.
They are one of the few OPEC nations that is not Arab dominated.
Yep. Any increase in production would require a great deal of investment, which would require an easing of sanctions.
Yes.
So from foes to frenemies, it's a plausible and welcome possibility, but not everyone is convinced.
Well, we'll see what happens.
We've had people running Venezuela from both sides of the spectrum, and you don't really know what's going on down there.
Well, I know that the people in Venezuela have been needy because they haven't had incomes.
Well, the oil revenue is cut in about half.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we're in a situation where those people could benefit from a different relationship with the United States. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica.
It is
and
that.
We have a Tesla Model 3 there.
That's a Tesla Model 3.
It is.
Tesla Model 3. Ta-da. Traditional automakers could face a Kodak moment if they fail to catch up with Tesla. And for those who don't understand, I'll explain what a Kodak moment is.
I hope you do. Legacy. I understand there's two very different meanings of that term. Legacy automakers are serious about EVs, but do they have what it takes to catch up with Tesla? According to Rob Hull at the UK's This Morning media outlet, quote, Tesla's ability to continue delivering EVs in 2022 could see it extend its stronghold over the market, end quote.
Well, a Kodak moment refers to the photo giant's decline when cameras and film were made obsolete by smartphones and digital. Happened almost overnight. One of the biggest companies in America
just folded.
Just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, demand for battery cars is booming.
Yes.
Okay, and Tesla is dominating both EV inquiries and EV deliveries. So they're on the right track.
They are.
Can traditional automakers keep up, or will it be too late? That's what they mean by the Kodak moment.
I think some of them will keep up, and some of them it'll just be too late.
If they are unable to react quickly enough, they risk leaving the door open for newer, more agile brands. And we're seeing some of them coming up from China.
Tesla is a newer, more agile brand itself.
And there's Chinese brands we never even heard of.
Yes.
And they're popping up right and left.
Kodak, at some point before it ran into trouble, used to advertise.
They had everything. They had the whole market locked up.
But they used to advertise, and they advertised about the Kodak moment, which was the moment at which you really needed to have your camera.
Yes, I remember that.
And that was that Kodak moment when they collapsed was kind of a facetious reference. That use of that term was a facetious reference to their advertising term. So, two very different meanings.
Talked about their Kodak moment.
And then when the Kodak moment came,
happened,
whoa!
It happened almost overnight.
It was like you had a successful, great company, and it just disappeared. Okay, we have Rust, and this is one of the most exciting ideas of the.
Well, we got a picture coming up here.
That's
not a face, folks.
No, it's not.
I'll bring it up. It's a very interesting picture.
It is a very interesting picture. Leave it up while we talk about this, would you, Tom? This is so people can see what's going on.
That's how an Ironair battery works. And George, you're going to tell us how.
Well, you're going to read you're going to read a title first, and this is from Popular Science.
Rusty metal could be the battery the energy grid needs.
Okay, an electrochemistry professor at MIT, Yet-Ming Chang, and his colleagues are working on a low-cost Ironair battery that will provide multi-day storage for renewable energy by 2024.
That's coming up quick,
This is coming up quick. When the battery is charged, rust in the battery turns into iron.
Well, rust is iron oxide.
Yeah, and discharging the battery means that the iron turns into rust.
Back and forth, back and forth.
You know, there's no lithium in this. There's no cobalt in it. There's no nickel in it. There's no rare
it's pretty cheap to make.
stuff. It's pretty cheap to make.
Right now, it's not suitable for cars.
And it very likely won't be because it's a big battery. But nevertheless, you know, the use of this in grid storage has enormous consequences.
It's made to order.
And do you have the? It seems to me that they said that the price of electricity from this will be down 90% from what it is from a.
I don't think I have that, but let me have a couple of notes here.
Okay, go ahead.
Electricity is highly perishable. You don't think about that.
Highly perishable.
If not used at the moment it is created, it rapidly dissipates its heat.
Boom.
Poof, gone.
Gone.
Full decarbonization of the electric grid can become a reality only when vast amounts of solar and wind energy can be stored and used at any time.
Right. And
so you gotta take it while you can. When the sun's shining,
make hay.
You make hay.
That's right.
Lithium-ion batteries are expensive.
Yes.
They involve mining rare metals.
Yes.
And are far from environmentally sustainable. Finding an alternative that is less ecologically degrading is crucial. And
Right.
this fits less ecologically degrading, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's just rust and iron.
They're talking about building a battery which is 15 megawatts and 1,500 megawatt hours.
That's pretty big.
It's amazing. It's absolutely huge. And I read a bunch of articles about this because I wanted to know more and more and more. And one of the things that they said was that the cost of electricity from these batteries will be about 10% of the cost of electricity from lithium-ion batteries. Now,
Okay.
if you think about that, you realize that means that because lithium-ion batteries are about 3 to 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity they
And these are less than that.
these are 90% less. So we're talking about
That's a big
a third of a cent, 0.3 to 0.35 cents per kilowatt hour. Add that to the price of wind or solar power, which might be around 3 cents, 2.5 cents. We're talking about electricity, wholesale price of electricity at below 3.5 cents per kilowatt
The
hour.
times they are changing.
And this is going to be long-term electricity that can be stored up for a long time. You
In
can have
things like this.
several days worth of electricity all ready to go. So if you've got cloudy weather and you can only produce half of what you would normally produce, this thing will tide you over.
These metal air batteries were first designed in 1878. They've been
It's
around
an
a long
old
time.
technology, but they have.
But they're not currently suitable for electric vehicles.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah.
The technology uses atmospheric oxygen as a cathode, which is an electron receiver,
Right.
and a metal anode, which is a cheap metal, it's iron or aluminum. The anode consists of cheap and abundantly available metals such as aluminum, zinc, or iron.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they can make these batteries cheap, and they can store a lot of energy, but they're not small and not going to fit in a car.
Yes, but if these things are brought into the field, that means we wouldn't have lithium-based grid storage. So the lithium that would normally be expected to go into them can go into cars.
It's going to go into cars where they can use them better.
That's right. Okay, we should keep
Yeah,
going.
we got Monday, March 14th coming up.
And this is a picture of the Chmelnitsky.
I'll let you try.
I'm trying, but I'm not making it, I'm sure. Nuclear plant, and this is from Yahoo.
This is not the one we saw with the 6 reactors.
No, it is not. It's
Well-
one that they bombed, though.
Why is Putin hell-bent on capturing Ukraine's nuclear reactors? Or I should correct myself. Nuclear reactors.
I can't even say it. Turning off the power nationwide, as Russian forces have done on a smaller scale at Mariupol in the middle of winter, creates mass hardship and suffering for the Ukrainian people. This is crimes against humanity. This is
It certainly
targeting.
sounds like it.
It is there to produce terror. It is there to produce misery. And that is apparently a weapon Putin feels free to utilize, one expert on warfare said. And you know, Tom, when I saw this, I thought, I want to find out more about what our military people think about Putin. And I went online and I started looking, and I came across 2 different articles from 2 different retired generals, American generals, and they both said one of the things that this war has shown is how completely incompetent the Russian military is.
That's interesting.
And it's like everything goes wrong for them because they don't know what they're doing. So,
Well, Ukraine is home to 3 additional nuclear facilities,
yeah,
totaling 9 more reactors.
yeah.
And some observers have theorized those are also likely to be targeted
Oh, I think they will be.
as Russia seeks to gain control over the nation's power supply.
Yeah, yeah. And in the meantime, Western banks have got their money, and when this war ends, I think the West may say, regardless of what kind of deal ends the war, they may say, well, we're going to build
They're
back
coming
the
up with some
Ukraine.
weird stuff. I mean, Russia's stated reason is that Kiev has been using material at the sites to build a thermonuclear bomb. that the Ukraine intended to use against Russia.
Yeah, of course.
This truly Orwellian. It's a
Orwellian,
baseless
yeah.
invention to justify the invasion and seizures of nuclear power plants.
Well, we have seen a lot come from the Russian government and spokesmen that has simply been wrong. And we've seen enough of that I think that it's fair to say that there's no reason to trust anything they say.
Well, they seem to be targeting nuclear plants to put pressure on the Ukrainian government to capitulate.
Yeah.
Okay, the takeovers are also a way to warn NATO against their potential involvement in the conflict.
Well, and the Poles apparently really want to get involved, and the Poles are part of NATO. Okay, we should go on. We've got a picture here of airplanes.
We've got some aeroplanes.
And this is from Clean Tech.
I like the one on the right there. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it looks like a small flying wing.
Now, I wonder if these airplanes, if any of these real airplanes are flying.
I don't know. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. I know that airplanes, these are all electric, by the way.
Yeah.
So let's get the title of this.
Electrifying trains, planes, and dirty big mining trucks.
Twiggy Forrest, and Twiggy Forrest, by the way, is
That's the guy's name.
It's Twiggy is his nickname. I forget his actual name, but his last name is Forrest, and he's fondly called Twiggy by people in Australia, and he's a very rich Australian. Has all the big boy toys, and he's planning to electrify all of them and run them all on green hydrogen and gravity. He plans to use Williams Advanced Engineering's battery tech in a push to electrify Fortescue's mining equipment and planes and trains and dirty big mining trucks.
I was reading the article. They got a mining truck, which more than a truck, it's almost like a railroad. It goes downhill, generates enough electricity to bring it back. We are all citizens of the global world, and people want to travel and explore new places without being forced to pollute the planet.
Yep.
The problem isn't travel. The problem is how we fuel our planes and ships.
Yes.
All of that must become emissions-free.
Yes, all of it, 100%.
No greenwash, no mirage, just 100% green.
No sales of Russian oil and gas. And that's the reason why Putin is upset.
Yes.
Okay, we should go on. Our next item is from CNN. We have a climate protest picture. This is not a recent climate protest picture, but anyway.
There is no planet B.
There is no planet B. That's
An excruciating year. Climate activists reset with Biden's agenda on life support.
President Joe Biden, quote, was supposed to show how to build back better in his back pocket and slam it down on the table and say, China, India, how do you like them apples, end quote. Bill McKibben said this. Quote, but he showed up with nothing and had nothing to say, end quote.
That's Bill McKibben saying that.
Yeah, Bill McKibben is...
We ought to try to get him on the show.
I don't think he'd show up.
I don't know. He's from Vermont.
He's from Vermont, but I have a feeling that he's busy doing other things.
Well, he's a pretty busy man.
He is.
The COP26 summit have been touted as an opportunity to forge an off-ramp from the climate catastrophe. Instead, negotiators walked away with another series of ambitious goals with no mechanism for enforcement.
They didn't have a mechanism for enforcement.
That's what they're saying here.
Anyway.
Biden was the first president to center his administration around the threat of climate change. But major progress has proved difficult to achieve. His move to ban imports from Russia has the fossil fuel industry primed to increase output, encouraging increased production from Venezuela, which we just mentioned, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, this Green New Deal has become a rallying cry for a new generation of progressive activists, and I'm going to put them up for a second, because that's who we're talking about.
Yeah.
They saw it as the most viable off-ramp on the road to further climate disaster.
Yep.
And Manchin, he's a congressman.
He's a congressman.
Congressman, yeah.
From West Virginia. He is a Democrat.
He's a Democrat. Well, you might call him that.
He calls himself a Democrat.
But he's not.
He disagrees with no other Democrat.
Manchin, in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, has pushed for boosting fossil fuel production and infrastructure immediately.
Yeah.
Well, he is a big supporter of the coal mining industry.
And he's a big owner of coal mines.
And he is, yes. He's a very wealthy man.
Yeah. Okay, we should keep going.
I think we should.
We've got
something
an
else
item
coming
here
up
from Metro. That is a picture of the Chernobyl confinement, which is the outer shell has been built over the
it's intended to confine everything into that.
Over the exploded reactor. What do you have for a title, Tom?
Chernobyl nuclear plant loses power hours after being turned back on.
Yep. Ukraine's Chernobyl nuclear plant has lost power just hours after it was restored. The decommissioned plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster, was seized by Russian forces within days of the invasion. Its high-voltage power line was damaged by fighting. It lost power. Then Ukrainians restored power in the midst of all the Russians. That's what I understand. I might be wrong. And then you Russian soldiers cut off power again. And I have since seen headlines that said the power has been restored. But when I looked into that, it looks to me like they were talking about the restoration that took place earlier.
Well, that seems to be it. They restored it yesterday, but that didn't last long. And it cut out this morning. Well, this morning was when they wrote this.
Yeah.
The lack of power means the cooling systems are not operating normally and are relying on backup electricity. So that could be scary.
Yeah, it could
the
be.
IAEA is saying the International Association of Electrical. What's IEA?
IAEA.
It's an electrical company.
It's
electrical.
I don't know.
Well, it's saying its cooling ponds are large enough to keep the spent fuel in safe condition.
International Atomic Energy Agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it means. Well, its cooling ponds are large enough to keep the spent fuel in safe condition, even if the power supply is interrupted. I hope they're right.
Yeah. Okay, our next item is from CNN.
Who's this? Who's this guy?
This is Joe Biden in 2019.
Who's this guy?
He looks a little brighter there than he sometimes. Sometimes he looks like he's about to fall asleep. But he looks alert here.
He's alert there.
Yeah.
House Democrats to Biden, quote, use climate action to restart negotiations on a spending bill.
A block of 89 House Democrats, that's a lot of them, sent a letter to President Biden urging him to restart negotiations on a Democrat-only spending bill centered on climate change. The lawmakers stressed that Biden must not fail on climate change. Well, they're getting upset about the same thing that Bill McKibben was.
Yeah.
So, and Tom, we're running behind, so we should probably
move on.
Unless you've got something to say on that.
Well, the lawmakers stressed that Biden cannot fail to act on climate change.
Yeah. Okay. This picture is just a kind of a random picture I chose of Hawaii.
Looks like a nice beach.
Yeah, it does. This is from Clean Technica. Yeah, a little rocky, yeah. From Clean Technica.
Court case in Hawaii against fossil fuel companies passes a major milestone.
In Hawaii,
this is significant.
It is. A state judge ruled that a lawsuit seeking damages from major oil and gas companies can move forward. The companies are accused of working for decades to deceive the public and policymakers about the devastating impacts of climate change.
We've heard about something like that before.
I think we have.
The ruling sets an important precedent that the fossil industry has been fighting to prevent in similar cases across the country.
Right.
The case argues that major oil and gas producers have worked for decades to deceive the public about the devastating impacts of climate change.
Yeah,
and they have.
They have.
As a result, communities in Hawaii are now facing increased flooding, more extreme weather events, and rising seas.
Absolutely. Okay, our next item is...
There is a quick takeaway here.
Oh,
the Attorney General of Vermont has filed similar lawsuits.
Yes.
To hold fossil fuel companies accountable.
Accountable, yes. This has been going on for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica. We have a picture of the lineup of VW, Volkswagen, electric vehicles.
Volkswagen says that EV operations will be profitable earlier than expected. Well, I think they will.
Volkswagen Group told the press that several of its electric car models, including the Porsche Taycan, are sold out through the end of 2022. This is,
It's coming, folks.
Yeah. High demand is helping the electric car business become as profitable as its conventional car business more quickly than expected.
Well, Volkswagen has been working for several years on an aggressive plan to transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
They're aiming to have EVs account for half of its global production by 2030.
Right.
I think they're going to make that.
I think they are.
Originally, we thought it would take
ahead.
2 to 3 years until we saw the profit parity of internal combustions and battery electric vehicles. It's happening quicker than that.
It's happening now, I think.
Yeah,
now.
that's what this article is about.
Okay, our next item is from CNN. And here is I don't know what plant that is, but by golly, look at all
Looks like marijuana.
look at all of the pollen coming off of that.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
Don't stick your nose in there. It'll make you sneeze.
Allergy season will start much earlier and be far more intense because of the climate crisis.
A study published in Nature Communications, which is a peer-reviewed publication, found by the end of the century, pollen season could begin as much as 40 days earlier than it normally has in the U.S. because of global warming. Pollen counts could climb by as much as 250%. And by the way, speaking of climate change, a friend of mine told me a couple of weeks ago about seeing a large number of very fat robins.
Oh, yeah?
Who in February, these guys had not migrated. They had apparently hung around for the winter.
That has been happening.
So we're looking at a situation here where some of our migratory birds
aren't migrating.
They aren't migrating because Vermont is far enough south that they don't have to go any farther.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's what Mother Nature intended.
Well, pollen is something that is on people's radar because it influences their daily lives.
Yes.
More than 24 million people in the U.S. experience pollen-induced respiratory allergies or hay fever. I even got a touch of it.
My mother used to suffer from that. She really suffered from it. She had to go get allergy shots.
Well, a longer and earlier start to pollen season could trigger a public health emergency.
Yeah, it could. Okay.
Well, we got a final picture coming up.
We have our final picture for our final article. And that, by the way, is a picture of that I went to Unsplash in this particular case, and I just typed the name Denmark. And that was one of the pictures that showed up.
Well, that is a bunch of buildings that were built during the Hanseatic League. Remember, it's back in the 13th century or something like that.
Yeah,
and the reason I know that is I was in Bergen, Norway.
Okay.
And I saw almost the exact picture.
Yeah.
And the buildings were built way back then.
Yeah.
And the Hanseatic League was a medieval commercial and defense confederation of merchant guilds and market towns in Europe.
And the funny thing about it is, you take Hamburg, for example, which was I think under the Holy Roman Empire, I believe it was what they called a free city, which meant that it was part of the empire, but it had a whole lot of freedoms that other places didn't have. Hamburg was part of the Hanseatic League, and it supplied ships to the Navy for the Hanseatic League.
Okay.
And the Hanseatic League operated absolutely independently of the Holy Roman Empire.
Of the government.
Which, by the way, did not include the city of Rome. And
it was neither holy nor Roman or an empire.
Right, and ultimately it even dissociated itself from the Roman Catholic Church. So it was a Protestant Holy Roman Empire that was situated in Germany. But the Hanseatic League was extremely important. It was extremely powerful. It had offices all over the place.
It was in effect a government.
Yeah, it was a government without a country.
Yep.
It was a government that was made up of allegiances of cities and towns, merchants, whoever happened, and they had wars of their own. They had
they did.
Wars of the Hanseatic League versus whoever it was that they were upset with.
Well, Denmark targets 6 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity by 2030.
The Danish government has reached an agreement to accelerate the development of green fuels. This is going to be competitive with Russian natural gas. Through a tender support the construction of 4.6 gigawatts to 6 gigawatts of Power 2X capacity by 2030. Denmark will support hydrogen production, better framework conditions for producers, and other measures.
So the X in the terminology refers to whatever the power is used for.
That's right.
Power to hydrogen, power to liquid, power to methane, etc.
Power to ammonia.
Power to ammonia,
Yeah.
power to X.
Power to X.
Power to power.
Power to power in different forms. And, you know, this is what they're talking about. And obviously they had to have been well into discussions and thoughts about this before Russia invaded the Ukraine. But this is another blow to the Russian attack in the Ukraine. And it's like everything that's going on in Europe now is a response to the Russians attacking the Ukraine. And it really kind of has me annoyed. Because they should have.
Why is Putin doing it?
What?
Why is Putin doing it? It seems like he's got nothing to gain and everything to lose.
I think he's fearful. He's a bully, and he is afraid.
A bully.
Bullies operate out of fear. Putin is afraid. That's why he's a bully. And so he, like a bully, threatens violence, produces violence. You know, when my daughter, who was not a big girl, was in kindergarten.
She's tiny, isn't she?
She's rather small. And she had a friend in kindergarten, her best friend, and a bully started picking on her friend.
Uh-huh.
And she punched him in the nose.
Good for her.
Giving him a bloody nose,
Good
by
for
the
her.
way. And then knocked him over. And this boy, who was a rather big boy, who had been picking on her friend, was just
stunned.
He was wailing on the ground. They became friends after that, by the way. But
interesting.
you know, why does a bully act like a bully? I think usually it's because he's afraid of something.
That's an interesting thought.
And Putin is acting like a bully because he is afraid of losing his income from the sale of oil and gas, which the Europeans have said that's what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. So he attacks, and what do the Europeans do? They say, we're going to give up your oil and gas twice as fast, 3 times as fast. And so he's in trouble. And he had a war chest for this invasion in European banks. That's all been frozen.
Uh-huh.
If the Europeans
he can't touch it.
He can't get it. If the Europeans have any sense about this thing, they're going to say, okay, we're going to put all of this money, the $380 billion or whatever it is that you've got in this war chest, we're going to make that all subject to lawsuits from the Ukrainian government or the Ukrainian people to rebuild. And only after they have rebuilt can you have whatever residue there is of all this money. That's what I think they should do. And the Russian people, my understanding is that Putin is hiding in a bunker right now.
He could very well be. By the way, we got a couple of decorations on a desk
decorations,
here
yes.
That I just brought up for today, because today is St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
And St. Patrick wasn't an Irishman.
No, he was Welsh.
And his name was not Patrick.
What was his name?
I don't know, but Patrick refers to his status. He was a patrician.
Okay.
It was a Roman Empire at that time.
Yeah, actually
so he's neither Irish nor his name was Patrick.
That's interesting because Patrick was there before the Romans withdrew from Britain. And he was kidnapped, I believe, from Wales.
Yeah, he was, right. He was kidnapped, right.
And he became a slave in Ireland.
Yep.
Got out of that, went back to Britain.
Yep.
Became a missionary, went back to Ireland to convert the people who had kidnapped him.
Well, he's responsible for the Irish symbol of the shamrock.
Yes, that's right.
3 gods in one person. Three persons in one God.
The Trinity.
The Trinity.
So here we are with St. Patrick, who is the symbol of merrymaking in the United States. It's time to...
Well, as I told you earlier in the show, in New York City, on St. Patrick's Day, it's not unusual to see a black person walking around with a sign on their chest that says, "Kiss me, I'm Irish."
Right. So there we have it for this week, and we hope you come back next time. Oh, you should put that up. Have a superbly admirable week.
Why don't I put that up so we can say it again?
Have a superbly admirable week.